Hello, my name is Helen Brinkman. I'm Assistant Prosecuting Attorney here in Kent County, Grand Rapids, Michigan. I have the privilege of being able to interview both Joseph and Brigitte, Cazalis Collins and Joseph Collins. They're here. They are involved with fighting sex trafficking in Nepal. I work as an assistant prosecutor who handles child sex crimes in Kent County, Michigan. This is a global problem, and we are here to discuss how you're handling this, actually combating it on the front lines in Nepal. So I'm going to start out our interview here today and ask you, first of all, how did the two of you meet? How did the two of you get together before all of this?
Well, like many foreigners, we come here to America for a year or so, and we will go home. And as many of us, we don't, because we find a partner in life, and we end up staying partners for life. So that's how it happens. And that was in Cambridge, Massachusetts.
Cambridge, Massachusetts. Mm-hmm. And how was it that the two of you met?
I don't remember the exact first time, but I did meet Brigitte. One of the things that Brigitte was doing in America was teaching French to adults.
Oh.
And since I, in my business at the time, needed to speak French a little better, I ended up marrying my tutor.
Very good. So how was it that the both of you ended up in Katmandu?
Well, that's a long story. Joe has been a mountaineer all his life, and he had always wanted to go back to base camp of Everest. I'd climbed too many mountains to attempt going to Everest, but he said, you know, if we train very well, we can do it, you can do it. And so I spent a year learning Nepali, reading everything about Nepal. I was in charge of that. Joe was in charge of the mountaineering part of it, and we went. And Joe said it will be a life-changing experience, and little did I know. And then when we came back, Joe decided that he had to do something for the country. He was just amazed and had an idea which he presented to the Harvard School of Law, and they said, what a brilliant idea, why don't you run with it? And he did, and I followed him because he had to be there many months a year, and eventually came to want to do something myself.
Well, tell me what it was. Tell the audience what it was that captured your attention. What was it that started this ball rolling? What did you see when you were there?
Well, I think if every day, although we had, as Westerners in Nepal, you have a very privileged life. And but right outside of your door, it's misery. And we used to actually collect our food and have our driver give it every morning because we just could not bear having people left and right of you. But begging and being poverty, that was about 23 years ago. And you just want to make a difference. You try to make a difference. And
tell the audience what the cages are. What is that for those?
Well, the caging is, I guess, the closest for Americans. For Europeans, it's a little bit easier, but for Americans, it's those old-fashioned, which you still see in certain part of the country, old-fashioned shutters for shops. You know, so those are shutters, and those are actual shutters, and they are ornate, more ornate than others, and those are keeping the young women from moving outside. Describe
the scene for us. Describe the scene for us. What would you see if you were walking by the cages?
Well, first of all, you would probably be in an area where there were a lot of cages. A lot of the Nepalese girls end up in Mumbai, which has the largest red light district in the world. Over 200,000 prostitutes in that one area of Mumbai. And it would look like any other poverty area of India. Children, horses, cows, the usual sort of Indian thing. The only difference would be that you would see a lot of young women, either in the windows or someplace. And unfortunately, as you walked by innocently, you wouldn't understand that they are prisoners.
And why not?
If you didn't know. If you didn't know.
Well, first of all, you can't even speak to them. But as a matter of fact, they are put in the brothels and put in such a defensive way that they have no out. They are taken from another culture, probably illiterate even in their own culture. They're taken across and taken advantage of, sold many times along the way, and end up in a situation where they don't speak the language very well, they have no papers, et cetera, et cetera. They're intimidated and frankly have been so physically brutalized until they submit to this life that they live in terror.
Why don't we start from the beginning for the audience that doesn't know? Tell us how these children end up in these brothels. How does this take place? How does this happen?
Unfortunately, is the demand is so big that one goes everywhere to find it. And Nepalese girls are more. It's a poor country, so it's easier to go, and they are baits, and it's easier to go to those countries and get them out. And if you go up in the hills and con the parents into thinking that their daughters is going to be a maid in a nice home in Katmandu, and because the law demands that you go to school as a maid in the afternoon or the morning, you will be educated, and as a girl who is going to be married, for whom you have to have a diary, if she speaks English, you are sure to find a better husband for her. So parents will bite and will be given a year's salary, the equivalent of $100, because she won't be coming home that first year. How can you refuse? So then from then on, she's being sold maybe halfway down Katmandu to somebody else. And then in Katmandu, she may be drugged and put on the bus. And then she'll be sold again at the border. And then finally will be sold in the brothels. So it's poverty, I'm afraid, and lack of education and the desire to get a better life. But it happened in the streets of Paris when Victor Hugo was writing his books, and it's happening everywhere. Look at the thousands of people who dare cross the Mediterranean for the same purpose. So the only grace in all this is that it's nothing new, but the modern world, the world of today, the richer country are taking awareness and are becoming aware, and the peoples are becoming aware. And this is where we have to continue our march and hopefully find a solution.
So for $100, the parents will sell their child believing they're going to school, but they're not going to school.
Yes.
They don't view it as selling, actually. What the original recruiter says is merely this is her first year's salary. They, sugarcoat it as best they can. But we also have to mention that this has a lot to do with the role of women and where they are placed in that society. And a young girl, as Brigitte says, is a liability economically, et cetera, et cetera. So right away she's at the low end, the totem pole.
In the family structure.
in the social structure.
In the society.
And also remember that we have a very serious caste system. And if she's probably one of the lower castes because she's a poor farm girl up in the hills, 2 days walk from a road, she really doesn't have, society doesn't recognize any real sort of value. So when you assemble in this 12-year-old girl who can't read or write, never been more than 500 yards from her home, and all of a sudden she's taken away, there are a whole other set of circumstances which make trafficking easy. The first is that India and Nepal have an open border. There is no paperwork, no special deal going on at the border. They can pass. So it makes it easy to take children or get them from one place to another. The second reason is that Nepal has been suffering from an internal revolution, et cetera, for a number of years now. And when you have this kind of anarchy, the police and these officials are busy with other problems. And the third thing is what Brigitte talked about, is the girls are a broad variety of ethnicity, and so they appear exotic. And so the brothel owner will pay more for this exotic-looking young woman. And I guess the last thing is that it's easier, you take less of a risk as a trafficker to take a girl from the hills of Nepal. If you take a girl in India, she can speak Hindi, she can go to the police, but this girl knows nothing, and she's a prisoner.
All right, so you see this going on, and you decide to do something about this. What have you done? What's your organization? What's the goal?
Well, first, if I may just take 2 seconds, I just didn't want to be another, having lived in Nepal for quite a few years before I decided to take on this and ask Anuradha if I could help her. I decided that I was not going to be another Western entity coming with my know-how, which is better than yours, and was going to reinvent the wheel. Mighty Nepal was settled and recognized as a wonderful center fighting sex trafficking. And what I came to ask her is what I could do and how I could, with my Western approach and skills, what I could do. And so Friends of Mighty Nepal, which we founded 10 years ago in Boston, Massachusetts, is really an extension of Mighty Nepal. For legal reasons, we are a separate entity, 501c3, the whole, yard. But I do not consider myself a separate entity. We work for Mighty Nepal. We bring our knowledge, we bring our capacities because we are lucky to live in the West. But we are only miles across the world separate us. Otherwise, we work together and function together.
So tell the audience what it is that you do. Go ahead.
Well, when you see the problem, and then you have to say, well, how really can we organize ourselves in this way? We, of course, having lived there for a while, understood that most of the reasons why other aid attempts don't do very well is the lack of understanding of the local culture. So the first thing we decided was that whatever we did, we were advisors. You tell us what you need, what you want, we will do what we can to help. And then after making that decision, it became clear to us that really what we could do best was to be a funnel. Instead of building up a big American organization and with just running around fundraising, that with all the assets of this country, technology, medical care, products, you name it. And so what we've done is just grown laterally so that we have partners now who provide a wide variety of services. Harvard School of Public Health did a landmark study of the medical needs of trafficked women because of Friends of Mighty Nepal. We introduced them to it, et cetera, and the articles appeared in JAMA. Mm-hmm. The Johns Hopkins School of Public Health now sends women doctors over there regularly. Again, these are things that we can't do no matter how much money we have. The United States State Department has also been contributing to help us work on the border crossings, et cetera. And a perfect example of a funnel is that Brigitte spoke at the University of Washington, and we were approached by a group called A Child's Right, and their cause is that everybody should have clean drinking water. Well, the next thing we know, the owner of this marvelous water filter company is sending crews over there. We have 16 different locations in Nepal, and they now have, as Anuradha says proudly, we've got the purest water in Nepal.
Wonderful.
But the change is there's no dysentery, the girls don't have the skin diseases, our medical bills go down. That's what we try to do, is to make people aware. And we're not proud, we ask for help.
Absolutely. Why don't you walk us through one girl's story. One girl's story from capture, sale, into this thing, and how she may, give us one girl's story that came through your organization.
Okay. Well, this will be a hypothetical. Okay. And maybe we can all, watching this show, and you can
it's a compilation of girls, because I think I could not take you through one without having a hard time finishing the rest of the story. So yeah. I think it's easier if we talk more because they are they are very, very, very heartbreaking. So forgive us if we don't give one example, but the typical person, may I?
Of course.
The typical person, young woman, will be from 9 to 12 years old, and she will be living somewhere in the village where she is not even named, because most children in Nepal have a nickname. So your little sister, sister of the little sister, grandsister, you know, there's all these things, which makes it takes you a few years to understand, but then eventually you do. And so she really doesn't know her name. And she has been, since the age of 3, taking care of goats and taking care of the hay. And if she's lucky, her little bottom has been covered, but usually she'll have something rather short. And she's going to wait her fate until marriage come upon her, which will be chosen, which will be decided by her parents. And her brother may be going to school because he's the brother, and most likely will be going to school, but she has very little chance of going to school. And then eventually, when she's 12, 9, 10, 11 years old, somebody comes up at the door. Usually, I would say 99%, it's never a stranger. It's always somebody knows.
Somebody
and in Nepal,
they trust.
Yes, the family trust, or a cousin of the brother, or somebody to whom you speak. And they will propose to the parents that, you know, they've got a great opportunity for the girls to go to work to Katmandu and be a maid. And the parents, for whom it is a burden to have a girl, because she will not live to stay in their home. She will go into her mother-in-law's home. She will not be there to take care of them when they get old, because she will be taking care of her mother-in-law. And she also will not bury them when it's time to light the pyre at their funeral, which means that they will not, to use a Christian way, they will not go to heaven. So all those things are still going on. Therefore, being a burden, she's being taken, offered a great opportunity to make a difference. And she is anxious to do it too. And off she goes. And she may be sold a few kilometers down the hill to a stranger. But this is an auntie, don't worry, she'll be taking care of you. And then in Katmandu, she can be drugged and put on a bus. She will be tricked into going to the bus. And remember, she may not even know the name of the mountain under which she was born, but in her own dialect. So she is totally ignorant of life, period. And then she ends up across the border, and then she's sold again into the brothels.
And how much do they sell for?
It's from $100, let's say, 1 year to the parents, paid to the parents, to about $1,600 when she is sold into the brothel of Calcutta or Mumbai. And unfortunately, a year ago, a little bit more than a year ago, we discovered a new, even more atrocious, if one can even think of more atrocious thing, and of man's inhumanity to man. But now what they do is that they take that person, sell the organ, the kidney, have the girl recuperate long enough so that she's still a good money provider. And once she's recovered, she's sold again. So at that way, she probably can bring between $8,000 and $10,000. And then you can retire for life and have a good life.
And at the age of 9 or 12, how are they then forced into this operation? What happens to them after they're sold?
Oh, it's very hard for me to say. They're basically beaten and raped to death. There is no other word. They just are.
How long do they survive in these
Oh, they do.
brothels?
They're very, very strong young ladies. They're very strong young ladies because when we rescue them and when we bring them back to Katmandu. Let me tell you, they walk with their head high and they have many lessons to teach us. But they have to succumb to utter torture. There is no other word for it.
And you talked about medicine.
Well, if I may add one other thing to this description to make sure that people understand what happens to this life is it becomes a commodity. It's no longer a human being. The money changes hands over and over again. The first payment to the parents.
Right.
Then the trafficker who will take her across the border, money changes hands again. She's then sold to a broker in India. Money changes hands again. If they can sell an organ, money changes again. They sell her to the brothel, money changes again. Every man that comes in, money changes hands. And even the police, of course, are paid bribes to go away. So she becomes an absolute commodity with no value except the
Correct. And it's true that the law enforcement officers are right there across from the cages, and
they're customers.
They're customers.
Sure.
If I may also add one thing, she's doubly a prisoner. She's a prisoner as a sex slave, but she's also a prisoner because she has to reimburse the money that she was sold for. So she's constantly in debt.
Food, everything.
And she's constantly, and they take away money for her to maintain being alive. The food, the medical thing. So she is indebted for life.
So tell me, what does your organization, how do you rescue these children, these young women?
Well, one of the ways we could describe it is we hope that we'd be happy to provide you with a film called The Day My God Died.
Go ahead and tell them about that.
Well, shall we do it now?
Sure.
Okay. The Day My God Died was a documentary done in 2004 by a director, Andy Levine. And Andy shot in Nepal and India. And at that time, his producer was a woman called Geraldine Dreyfus. Money was supplied by the Gates Foundation, and the film was later nominated for an Emmy as the best documentary in 2005. After seeing this film, and we use it regularly and be happy to make copies available to you or whatever, Geraldine Dreyfus saw this tragedy and she said, I have to do something about this. I'm going to create a film better directed toward the general public, not a documentary. And she did Born into Brothels, for which she won an Academy Award.
Very good. So describe for the audience what it is, how does a rescue happen? What happens?
Well, I'd like to say that not all police women and men are not the wrong side. I'm a big defender of police because they have a tough work to do, and they are underpaid in many ways, many places, and sometimes they have to look elsewhere. So we are lucky. Mighty Nepal does a lot of things and educates also police in Nepal and India. And so in India, when we do rescue, we have a good group of police who are behind us 100%. So it demands preparation. And the way we do it, the Nepalese, is that we have young girls who have already been rescued or they fled, and they know where the Nepalese girls are, and along with the police we do a raid and rescue the girls.
But what happens to these young girls who try to escape?
Most of them I dare say don't really try to even escape because they just don't know where they are. They are in a foreign land, and it's no different from the girl who is brought from Haiti or Laos and who is in Massachusetts, Boston, Massachusetts, and who is thrown into Vermont, and then in Atlanta and Alabama. Who does she go to?
Right.
Who does she go to?
So the ones that you managed to rescue, the ones that actually make it into your care, what do you do to avoid them returning to this life? What do you do for them?
Well,
I like to say that it's an A to Z rehabilitation, from everyday housing, feeding, health, to their wonderful camaraderie. They are the best psychologists to each other that can be within that group, to teaching them skills and to even helping them to get married if that's what they want to do. And sadly, we lose some to HIV/AIDS. We lose some to babies who are born with HIV also. And so we have a hospice where they go and die as gracefully as we can make it. And the others go about getting a job, hopefully. Some of them come back too old to dare go to school because they feel intimidated being with young children. So we're trying to create a project when we have more money so that we could give them a minimum of education within that older group. So we train them as much as possible, and in many ways, beautician, hotel, furniture making. We are trying, and in the word of Anuradha, my dream is that Mighty Nepal will one day disappear. So we are not making Mighty a place that will be there forever. We're going to fight so that it disappears one day.
Little by little.
I could add one other thing to in whether it's keeping the girls from going back, which most of them, of course, don't want to do. Occasionally, one will go back. But basically, what happens at Mighty Nepal, other than the aid and the things that we try to do, is that internally this becomes a community of young women and older women who've been there, done that, and they're sisters.
Right.
And whether they go back out onto the border and stop those trucks and look in the buses and try to find girls, whether they stay home and cook for the children, no matter what they do, they become sisters. And that's the genius of what Anuradha Koirala has done at Mighty Nepal, because she's taken this zeal, this understanding, this camaraderie, and she's been able to channel it in the various aspects of what's needed at this institution. One day, Brigitte and I were teasing her, and we said, Anuradha, you really are a social entrepreneur. You're not a school teacher anymore. Look what you've done. You've organized this thing. The girls have, and they work hard every day.
Explain what that does to the community. What do the girls do in the community that helps stop this cycle?
Well, other than first of all, there's their willingness to work so hard. And let me just tell you how Anuradha describes it. She said, Joe, I said, you have to motivate them. And she said, no. They need no motivation from me. They know the horror of the brothels, and they're working to save their sisters. So what do those sisters do? Those sisters do everything, every possible skill or every possible need is filled by these young ladies. For instance, if you've been trafficked and you're caught at the border, and the next thing you know, you've never been away from home, and now you're in a police car, this is a terrifying experience. There are girls at Mighty Nepal who have been trained and understand to bring this girl to reality. And it takes weeks sometimes, but that's a sister helping a sister. So it's everywhere in the organization. It's that key element.
You said they're stopping trucks at the borders. What is that?
Well, at the border we have a system, and where the girls work with the police, and everybody knows about the Mighty Girls, and we stop. And the girls have a seventh sense, and if they see somebody who would be a trafficked girl, they bring her down, and with the person who is accompanying her, and there is two sets of interrogation. And if we find out, or we think that they've been trafficked, then the police takes over, and we bring her back to the rehabilitation center.
We're running out of time. Give the audience your website. Tell them about your organization.
Go ahead, please.
We are friendsofmightynepal.org, and we are in the process of making bigger, better, hopefully, website, but it's still up. And you can always join Facebook the Friends of Mighty Nepal. And we are growing in that domain also.
Okay.
Mighty is M-A-I-T-I.
All right.
M-A-I-T-I. Friends of, Mighty means my mother's home, which we think is a nice way to name an organization that tries to do just that.
Absolutely, and you're getting them medicine, and you're helping them to be rescued, and you're catching them at the border. You're doing all these things.
Anything to help them return to society and try to live a normal
and
life.
help them die also. We also provide money for funerals because the Mighty Nepal girls are bad girls according to society, and therefore we are being punished. And Mighty Nepal has to pay more for the pious wood than a normal person.
And how many of those young ladies, when they're rescued, end up dying of AIDS or some
Well, the Harvard statistic is that if a girl is in there before the age of 15, at least 60% of them, because a woman's immunity doesn't build up when she's still a child. We have about 70 or 80 right now in the two hospices. I can't give you an exact figures, but it
varies. You know, you'll have 2 dying. We had one who just passed away, and she was very close. She's actually in the film. And then you'll have a quieter time, and then 2 or 3 would pass away. So it's not.
And they also die from other things because their immunity system is so bad that they fall prey to all sorts of things.
Well, I want to thank you for someone who works on this end of the scale, from someone who's in the courtroom prosecuting these cases. Thank you so much for your work and what you do.
Well, thank you for having us.
Thank you for having
us.
us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.